So hello everyone, welcome to our webinar, Building an Advocacy Content Calendar. Delighted you could all join us this morning, and there's quite a lot of you on the line, so that makes us think that there's kind of a hunger out there for learning more about content marketing, particularly in relation to advocacy, and that's kind of what we aim to do today. I'm Anne Dermody, I'm the Content Marketing Manager for CQ Roll Call here for Advocacy and Government Relations, and later on we're going to have a chat with Josh Habursky, who you probably know from our webinar series, and Josh is the Director of Advocacy at the Independent Community Bankers of America, and he has some great things to tell you about content calendars because he's ran many content campaigns himself. So there's really a lot of ground to cover on a topic like this, and we might follow up with a second webinar on the specifics of working with content, choosing it, figuring out what works and what doesn't and all that. But for the purpose of this 30 or 40 minutes, we've had to zone in a little. And of course, creating the actual content calendar is just the very, very first step. Then you've got to implement it, see what's working, pivot, and promote it. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Josh, who, like I mentioned, has put together multiple content-driven campaigns over the years. And he'll talk a little about why actual calendars and how they should work. And then I'll go into what you kind of need to be putting in there as content, how to advance it as a strategy, and most of all, maybe how to promote it. So without further ado, over to you, Josh.
Thank you, Anne. I think that we really got a great topic for this webinar series as part of the series, Building an Advocacy Content Calendar. It's incredibly important as we're getting into the new Congress and the new year of staying organized and staying focused as, you know, grassroots practitioners as well in the larger government relations sphere. So building a content calendar and knowing exactly when things are going to launch is incredibly important. As you can see on screen, here's an example of something that was just mocked up in Google that describes the different content pieces, from blogs to infographics to landing pages. And we'll get into the details more as the webinar goes along. So the basics, a content calendar versus an editorial calendar, they're very similar but somewhat different, and I think the distinction is important to note. So a content calendar is a shareable resource that marketing teams can use to plan all content marketing activity. The benefit of using the content or calendar format rather than just a long-form list of content is that you visualize how your content is distributed throughout the year. So, you know, you'll have topic, title, content details, some keywords, and target personas for it. And it'll go day to day. This is an example from HubSpot. I'll talk about a few different resources that, you know, different marketing teams as well as grassroots practitioners use to keep track and have a feasible content calendar. So an editorial calendar, these are used to define and control the process of creating content from idea through writing and publication. An individual or small business might have this publishing process, brainstorm content ideas to publish, where to publish, and when to publish. So this is also another organizational tool, and this view is from a system called Trello, which is a free resource that many blogs and other online publications will use to see where everything is in part of the process. And I think that, you know, using these together are a great way to keep everything on track. So the value of a content calendar and editorial calendar, obviously it will keep you more organized. It will communicate within the different departments. So I, you know, recommend having a content calendar for your government relations or your grassroots team and integrating that and bringing that content calendar with you to the marketing meetings or even the larger organizational meetings to keep everyone on track. These content calendars should be cooperative so that you work together with the other teams so that there's no overlap or, regurgitation of content. The worst thing that you can have is peppering your advocates or your membership with materials that another department did the day before. So a content calendar really prevents a lot of that. And it helps keep your message consistent, knowing that other people in different departments in the organization are working on different pieces of the puzzle. It will keep your message consistent. It also establishes a process of how things are going to operate, and I think that that's critical in especially your larger organizations, your nonprofits and trade associations that are over 100 employees and include multiple departments. Two is greater than one, as I mentioned. It's a part of a whole, so you'll have your content calendar. It might be for you as an individual employee. You might bring that to your government relations or your grassroots department, and then you might take that content calendar with you to the larger organization. So actual content calendars can be Google spreadsheets, free templates that Google offers. It can even be an Excel file. I also mentioned HubSpot. If you provide your email address and some information, you're able to access that content calendar that I showed you in the beginning. And then I also mentioned Trello. This is something that is a little more advanced, and it's a hybrid of a content calendar and an editorial calendar. I use Trello in my day-to-day operations also. Don't limit yourself to trying one and don't feel like you cannot use a secondary or tertiary program. I think programs like Slack or Basecamp are perfect to use in conjunction with a content calendar. The information will be more descriptive. It's more communicative, where you can talk to your different departments or employees in real time. And you can also refer to that content calendar. So the actual content, what is going to appear in a content calendar as an advocacy professional? Obviously, the top of the list is action alerts, peer-to-peer messages, or even organizational messages. For organizations like the American Diabetes Association that has, several hundreds of employees, having internal engagement is going to be a key piece of getting the message out there and getting your volunteers and your personnel that are in the states ready and able to operate in the advocacy and grassroots actions. Secondary messaging, social media, blog posts, direct mail, push notifications on mobile apps, website banners, op-eds, letters to the editor, advertisements. It's a laundry list. Anything that you can think of content-wise will appear in this calendar. And the more, the better. You want to make sure that there's nothing that falls into the cracks where, something's being published and other people in the department aren't aware, or there's that redundancy factor, as I mentioned. These are two examples of content pieces that we did at the ICBA, one regarding the small dollar loan where we were soliciting public comments and comments from bankers, and then the other one was a direct mail piece which we sent out in regards to the Durbin Amendment, and those were as part of larger campaigns where I had that in the content calendar so that everybody was aware when we were launching. Obviously, it's adaptive. The legislative process and regulatory process is unpredictable. You might have to move things up. You might have to move things back. It all depends on that. So it's important that it's a living, breathing document rather than something that is stringent and that you have to completely adhere to. So some tips and tricks for content itself. It should be creative, compelling, interactive, timely, seasonal, situational, shareable, and platform specific. I think that if you look and check off the list of these core attributes of content, your content is going to be successful. You're going to see increased action rates, whether it's an alert, a tweet, any type of social media message. If you follow these basic tenets, you're more than likely to get people interacting and doing things that you're asking them to do rather than not having these attributes applied to the content itself. One example of something that we did recently on social media was a trick-or-treat campaign. So, each day during October 24th through the 28th, we had a tweet and a LinkedIn post and Facebook post on our organizational accounts. We had a fun graphic for Halloween. We took a subtle shot at our competitors through the trick, and we also had a positive fact about community banking with the treat. And there was an action alert for each of them that went back and had our advocates to do something. This was a completely free resource that was done in collaboration between our marketing department and our grassroots and advocacy department. And this collaboration was completely free. We used Canva to create the graphics for this campaign and our general action alerts that had been previously set up. So not time-consuming, no cost to it, but a creative way that resulted in over 27,000 impressions and 600 people engaging with us online for this holiday and seasonal campaign. So just some additional resources to wrap up. CQ connectivity, and I know that you do a lot of stuff that is the fusion of marketing and government relations, and I'm constantly on connectivity looking to see if there's a new post out there and taking some of those tips and tricks and applying it to the day-to-day. HubSpot, like I said, is one of the leaders in content calendars and any online digital marketing information. I would check out Trello and Basecamp. I think both of those are, worth really looking into. And then, of course, the Grassroots Professional Network, which I chair, and, we're always looking for new stuff and putting information out there in the marketing communications and specifically advocacy communication sphere. We're working on a lot of new projects, including awards, so check out our website to see what's going on there. That about wraps it up. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Josh. Right, let's start with what's the point of a content calendar? Well, we live in this multi-channel world, and there are many ways now that you have to reach your advocates. Some people prefer to get informed on social media. Other people prefer to read a blog article. Someone else just wants to see it in an email where there's a call to action. Whatever it is, you've got to cross all bases to try and maximize your message. It stops stuff sneaking up on you. Maybe you have a Hill Day coming up, or there's an agency release date where you know you're going to have to get your advocates to comment on a regulation or something. If you map out the content needed to support those things, the emails, the handouts, whatever it is, it'll show you it'll give you a roadmap, and it'll make sure that you don't miss anything important. It makes you or someone on your team answerable and consistent. So it's a funny thing, but much in the same way that when you write down a to-do list, once things get written down and put in a central place for people to see, they suddenly take on a life of their own, and they have a much better chance of actually getting done. It clarifies things and avoids overlap. One of the great things about mapping out a calendar is that you start to see all the places you're not maximizing your outreach efforts. And by that I mean, say you've got an email campaign to get advocates to act on a certain piece of legislation or comment on a regulation. You probably have a call to action in there. But maybe you're not leading them to a place on your website where they can learn more. Or maybe you're sending out emails 2 days in a row but not posting anything new on social media to back it up. Or, you'll start to see those gaps where you'll think, oh, I could embed that tweet in my emails for people to share, or I could shorten that blog post and post it on Facebook, or, maybe I could put a sign-up form on my Facebook posts that lead back to our campaign newsletter. All of those things, they start to become much clearer when you've got a roadmap in place like a content calendar. It frames the ongoing story you want to tell with your advocacy efforts. So this is kind of where you need to get your marketing hat on a little bit. Content ultimately is a lure and a conversion tool. In my work, I'm using content as a tool to provide a resource for our current government relations and advocacy clients, because that helps us with retention. And it's also a way to create kind of brand awareness out there in the government relations world. So I'm keeping my clients and hopefully my future clients in mind. When you use content for advocacy, you're pretty much doing the same thing. Content can lead people to your website. It can get them to put in their emails when they take action, and that way you're helping convert them into advocates or future advocates. Or at the very least, you're creating an awareness of what's going on in your industry, and that's a service to your members and to your organization. It gets everyone on the same page. So this is something that should happen pretty organically, and this is where I really like using Google Docs for the content calendars, because you can share it easily among your own team and also with other departments. For instance, if you've got a marketing or editorial department at your organization, you can get them to add in initiatives that they might have underway that gel with what you're messaging about. And I hear a lot from people that they have a hard time getting buy-in from marketing and communications departments. Content calendar is a nice way of kind of getting it in there, because once everyone sees that they're all kind of messaging about the same thing, ultimately, they're much more likely to share and kind of have this unified voice, which is what you really want to happen. And frankly, it's also kind of a subtle bit of internal promotion, and that's also good for your team. So this last one, creates a calm and organized life. That obviously is pretty self-explanatory. If you're anything like me and you can't really even remember what you had for breakfast, then this leads to a much less hair-on-fire kind of work life. So what is content? Well, that depends on your organization, obviously, and also on the sort of issues you're dealing with and the sort of resources you have and what's already in place. But the important thing is that you need to start thinking of content as any out-facing communications your government relations or advocacy department sends out. And that's not limited to the emails or the calls to action or action alerts you have for a campaign. It is literally anything that is outward-facing that an advocate, a member, a potential advocate or member can see. So it can include things like blog articles, magazine articles, newsletters, white papers. Those ones are kind of the obvious ones. But it's also videos and calls to action and forum comments, which I think a lot of people sometimes forget. Maybe something big is going on in your industry, and on the forums out there, people are commenting on it. You need to be on there commenting too. It's the emails you send out. It's clearly all your social media, but it's stuff like maybe an annual or quarterly letter from your CEO or executive director, or personal stories that of how maybe your members or supporters are affected by a certain piece of legislation. And when I say no one piece is more important than the other, what I mean by that is, obviously, if you've spent 6 weeks on a white paper related to something in your industry, it's hard to kind of reconcile the idea that a tweet about that is just as important. But the truth is, if nobody ever finds that white paper, it's not really worth anything. So that tweet that you spend 20 minutes hopefully composing, leading to that white paper, is probably just arguably as important as the white paper itself. So what type of content works best? Well, what we have discovered here at Connectivity and with state trackers is that there are certain sorts of pieces that people are more likely to click on, to read, to linger on, to share. And I've just kind of boiled those, if you like, down into 5 ideas. The first one is awards-based. This could be anything like nominate the best advocacy chapter in our annual awards. It could be 40 members under 40. It could be anything along those lines. And it's in our nature to love a competition, and I think it's in our ego to kind of love seeing ourselves mentioned as a winner or a nominee. And that means that these types of pieces of content get a lot of traction because the winners or the moms or the uncles of the winners and nominees will vote for it and they'll share it, and that's ultimately what you're trying to get to happen. Crowdsource is also another way that kind of plays into that similar idea of sharing. So it could be something like, we talked to 20 members affected by HR 234. There's nothing out there that we're more fascinated with than kind of learning and hearing about what other people are doing. And the nice thing about this particular piece of content is that it also has the effect of you taking sort of a temperature gauge on what your members or the people in your industry are really thinking. And that, of course, is pretty important. Infographics. These are nice because they work along those sharing lines, too. If you don't know what an infographic is, I have an example there on the page. It's basically just a way of simplifying a long and complicated subject or report that might be boring and turning it into this sort of interesting visual graphic. You can't underestimate how much people love quick data. You know, we like to be able to say to our friends, did you know 70% of people who have cats live alone? Totally made that up, by the way. But people love those sort of statistics. And the beauty about that kind of thing is they have this sticky element that remains in our heads and stand out above the noise. And that, again, means they're more likely to be shared or remembered or quoted, which is your end goal. List posts. So that can be something like 15 reasons this bill will destroy your business. And it's a bit dramatic, but those sort of things are great because they're skim-worthy and fast, and even if you already know the first or second thing on the list, you can scan down to kind of new points that you mightn't know about. Guides to or how-tos. These are good for several reasons, and one of the main ones is that they show your authority on a subject. And in advocacy especially, you know, if something happens to legislation on your issue, you want to be the one the media calls. You want to be the one your members turn to. And you want to have resources on there that kind of show that you are, you know, the established figure in whatever this industry or issue is. Now I'll go on to the next slide, but all of the pieces I mentioned here share something in common that's kind of invaluable, and that's that they can be easily carved up and sliced and rediced sort of into this thing we call repurposing. So this slide may be the most important one, and it might be the one you need to take away most, and it's that the best content in the world, it doesn't matter if nobody sees it. So you need to spend at least as long as you spent creating it, promoting it. And here I have half the time creating, half the time promoting. There's a good argument to say a third of the time creating, 2/3 of the time promoting. But the good news is you don't have to publish all the time. I would say the one exception to that, obviously, is social media. You do need to be kind of consistent and out there a bit with that. But in terms of, you know, maybe a blog article or a magazine article, you don't have to get a front page out there every day. You're not a newspaper. Nobody expects you to be. And even your most avid supporters, frankly, wouldn't have the time to read it if you were doing that. You know, if you have a blog, personally, I think once a week is plenty. And I'll tell you why kind of later on. But that brings us to repurposing, which we touched on briefly in the last slide. So if you can carve things you've already created up and send out, you know, quick tweets that lead back to your full article, or pick out statistics that are likely to kind of have some clickbait, or, you know, you can turn your white paper or report into a short article, or maybe have a handful of your crowdsourced interviewees and create a video, tease your guide in a blog post or an email or on social, and lead people back to the main kind of event. You're generating a list that you can kind of promote to later on. You know, like that long-form piece that appeared in your magazine, slice that up and put it into a slide share. Make it an infographic. Make a YouTube video about it. Get the voices from it and make them live. All of those things, it doesn't mean that it doesn't take an extra piece of work, because it does, but you're not starting from scratch at least, and you're kind of giving legs to that piece that you spent a long, long time creating. So amplify. this is just how you've got to get the word out there, whatever way you can, you know. I'm constantly surprised at some government relations departments don't have a regular article in their maybe association or nonprofit magazine. You've got to get it in there, get into their newsletter, get into kind of internal and external communications. And I mention internal because your colleagues are generally the biggest advocates for your causes or issues in the industry. And if you can get them to share with their families and friends, you open up your world to a whole new group of advocates. And that's generally more effective because it's word of mouth. And, you know, blasting things from the company or association's social media accounts is fine, but if it's coming from a friend or family member, people are just much more likely to read it. So, you know, get your call to action or your action alert on the home page of your website. And this is if you don't have your own legislative action center for your government relations department, or even if you do, make sure when something big blows up that you're on the home page of the whole organization's website. If something's affecting your department dramatically, chances are it's affecting your whole industry. So it's very justifiable to be out there. Reach out to your partners and other organizations or coalitions to promote what you're doing. And when you do, make sure you get them to kind of backlink to you. You have to funnel people from your content or your call to action to other places on your site. And when they're there, then ask them to sign up for updates to your newsletter so that, again, you're building your list to promote future content too. Just going to touch briefly on this, the dreaded SEO that we keep kind of hearing about, search engine optimization. And I have this quote, the best place to hide a dead body is page 2 of Google. And, you know, we all know that's true. How many times do you look for something where you'll just scan kind of the first page of results and you never click on page 2, let alone page 10 in Google? So part of the reason you're amplifying so much is that you've written something that makes you look authoritative in your field. You want that piece to rise high in Google's rankings. So when people Google something related to it, your piece needs to be one of the first that pops up, right? And basically, that's all that SEO is. It's that task of improving your search engine results. Now, I won't get too much into the weeds with this, but suffice to say that this kind of comes back to that notion of not needing to publish all the time. Google no longer rewards quantity and frequency. They used to do. Now they're much more focused on quality, and it judges quality by how many times something is read or shared or, most importantly, linked to by other reputable sites. So that's kind of the end goal you need to keep in mind. So when you reach out to your partners and other organizations I had already mentioned or coalitions to promote what you're doing, make sure you ask them to hyperlink back to your article or white paper or your post, because that's what's going to help you really rise in the search rankings. I pulled up an example here that we posted on Connectivity back in February, and we made a really determined effort with this piece to get onto the first page of Google. So the first thing we did was decide what keywords we wanted to go after, and we came up with these grassroots marketing campaigns. It's in the headline there. So that no matter, you know, how many times someone would search for something related to that, it would hopefully pull up our article. And then we built this huge, and if I say so myself, pretty comprehensive list of 50 great grassroots marketing campaigns. I'd invite you to check it out, and I'll send a link in the follow-up email. But, you know, we put in the metrics there. We put in kind of how well the results of these campaigns were on social media, with click-throughs, with sign-ups, really great campaigns. And it took a long time to put this together. You know, it probably took over a week anyway. And but before we launched it, we also put this promotional plan in place. And by that I mean, as soon as it went live, I started tweeting and emailing all 50 organizations and groups that were mentioned. I sent out several emails to our own list, leading people there. Any organization that had a public relations person or shoulder organizations to those mentioned that might be interested and so forth. I sent them an email and really just kept, asking them to include hyperlinks, monitoring where those links were coming from. And I'd say in total, I probably devoted 2 to 3 full days promoting this thing. Now, that's a lot when you've got other things to do in your job, and we all do. But the result over time was that we're on page 1 of Google for all of the keywords and any combination of them we chose. And in several cases, we're the #1 article on that page. So do I think it was worth it? Absolutely. I mean, you won't have time to do it for everything, but if you've got a big piece of really worthy content that's kind of organization defining, then I would say, yes, do it. I just wanted to show these 2 examples of organizations that I think do a really nice job with their government relations kind of content. Both of them have legislative action centers that act as kind of the central hub, obviously, for their departments. But both of these guys, SHRM and the State Pain Policy Advocacy Network, do a nice job of kind of leading people to their site, getting them to take action, showing them the issues, and sort of keeping them engaged and on there. So I just wanted to include them, both of them. So finally, takeaways. Well, I think you can kind of boil it all down to these 4 things. So first and foremost, you've got to put your marketing hat on, and you've got to remember that ultimately we're all selling something. And, in a way, I think government relations is a nice kind of, sits nicely beside marketing, because government relations people, they know they have to get out there. They work a room like nobody else. So this is a good opportunity to kind of work that inner sales pitch, and you're trying to position yourself on an issue, or you're trying to convince someone to take action, whatever it is. You need to think like a marketer for this. Focus on promotion, not frequency. Promote, promote, promote. Like I said, it's at least as important to spend a ton of time on the promotion as it was to creating the piece. And don't feel under pressure to publish all the time. If you're promoting properly, you won't need to. Some of the most successful business bloggers have only a handful of articles out there that they just keep recycling, repurposing, and promoting. Share the calendar with other departments that are out-facing, like editorial, PR, marketing, even your CEO. You'll end up hearing more about what they're doing, and you'll get more promotion for your own stuff because they'll see where it fits in with their messaging. You'll also see the holes, and you'll get them pumped up, and that just generates more ideas. So that's about it. Hopefully you learned something today. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out. You can catch me at connectivity@cqrollcall.com or direct message me on Twitter at @AnnDermody. We will be following up by sending out an email to everybody with a link to this recording, and I'll also include that link to our 50 Stealable Grassroots Marketing Campaigns. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.